Chapter 1. The Global Apocalypse Game. Global Apocalypse Game Universal Players. A century later safe. Zone rebuilding. Human civilization mastering extraordinary. Players lowly gray citizen slum of Area 081 gray day. And Black Moon overdue. Rent usury Tang Ping. A wave of tingling consciousness hit Tang Ping. And countless unfamiliar memories exploded in his mind. It felt as though he had experienced another life. A bizarre and strange life. As his consciousness gradually returned to his body, he became aware of his surroundings. It was so cold. Where was this? Why was it so cold? Tang Ping felt as if he had just woken from a dream, in which he had drifted in darkness for a long time. When he opened his eyes, he saw a few drops of icy water falling onto his face. So cold. The bone-chilling water made Tang Ping shiver, and he suddenly woke up as if startled from a nightmare, gasping for air, not knowing what had happened. Where's this? How did I end up here? Tang Ping looked around in astonishment. This was definitely not his rental apartment. His rental apartment, although in poor condition, was not in such a dire state. The walls around him were covered in mold, with winding cracks tearing through the plaster, exposing rough sand. Inside, the cement ceiling was leaking, and the mattress beneath him was stiff, covered in black and red congealed filth. The entire room was incredibly small, only 6 square meters, and besides a door, there wasn't even a window. Yet this cramped room was filled with a jumble of items: old iron cans, rusty rebar, torn rags, and broken ropes cluttering the corners. Aside from this mess, there was only a 0.6-meter wide bed and a half-meter square broken table. The room emitted a rotten, sour smell. How did I end up here? Tang Ping was bewildered, his brows furrowed. He remembered that he had left work early due to some issues and should now be lying in his 20-square-meter rental apartment. Suddenly, those unfamiliar memories surged back like a tide. Countless pieces of information flooded into Tang Ping's mind, causing excruciating pain as if his head were about to explode. He clutched his head tightly, his muscles spasming, drenched in cold sweat. After an unknown amount of time, as he gasped for air, he finally managed to regain control of his body. However, the strange memories, along with a history spanning over a century, left Tang Ping in a daze. Sitting on the narrow bed, he breathed heavily, disbelief and inability to accept evident in his eyes. The cramping pain in his stomach finally brought him back to reality. He needed food, or he would truly starve to death. The intense hunger nearly drove him mad. At that moment, the young man in the room could no longer focus on the fact that he had crossed over. He frantically searched, hoping to find even a morsel of food. Nothing. There was nothing. In this small and dark room, apart from a pile of garbage, he couldn't find even a crumb of bun. He was going to starve to death. Tang Ping slumped to the ground in despair, unable to accept the reality of his situation, as it was truly too dire. Am I really going to starve to death? Tang Ping forced a bitter laugh. In the era he lived in, starving to death was an unimaginable thing, but now it was everywhere. From the original owner's memories, he learned that he lived in the safe zone, but in the very outermost and poorest Area 081. And even within Area 081, he resided in the worst slum. Moreover, the original owner's identity was that of a generational gray citizen. Gray citizens are those who cannot obtain a system panel without it. They do not even have the lowest level talent, making them the lowest of the low. Clearly, the original owner was such a person at the age of 16. He had not received a system panel or awakened any talent, and could only become a lowly gray citizen, even betting his life daily just to eat. Am I really going to die? Tang Ping sighed. This was worse than being a beast of burden. He didn't understand why heaven would play such a joke on him. He had merely complained about the burdens of life after being blamed by his boss. Did it have to go to such lengths to mock him? A broken clock, with no outer casing, still ticked away. Time was slowly approaching midnight. Tang Ping's consciousness was blurred. He had no strength left. Bang, bang, bang. Suddenly, there was a loud knocking at the door. Tang Ping, you've been overdue on rent for 3 days. If you don't pay now, pack your things and get out. Bang, bang, bang. Tang Ping, did you hear that? Don't think that closing the door means you can avoid paying rent. Outside, a string of curses rang out, accompanied by the sound of jangling keys. Click. The rusty door swung open to reveal a woman, her body covered in fat, with a face more fierce than a man's, and 3 scars on her face, as if from a beast's claws. Tang Ping, Tang Ping opened his eyes. He recognized this woman as the landlord of the building he lived in. Everyone, regardless of age or gender, called her Fat Tiger Mom. Although Fat Tiger Mom was also a gray citizen, she lived better than 99 of gray citizens, as evidenced by her bulk. It seemed he would soon be thrown out and die outside. He wondered if he would become a hungry ghost after death. Fat Tiger Mom's eyes filled with disdain. "So you're dying. Just don't die in my house. I have plenty of gray citizens renting here." Her greasy hands, with dirt hidden under her nails, reached out toward Tang Ping. The clock suddenly chimed a crisp tick as it struck midnight. 12 o'clock. Suddenly, Tang Ping felt as if his consciousness was being pulled away, abruptly separating from his body. His vision suddenly brightened. Clean sunlight flooded the room, and the unfinished instant noodles on the table emitted an enticing aroma. Tang Ping stared in astonishment at the noodles before turning to see the brilliant, clean sunlight outside. His 20-square-meter rental apartment, though not large, was clean and tidy, clear and bright. The wind outside fluttered the curtains, carrying the aroma of the noodles straight into his nose. He had never felt that his life was so wonderful. Could it be that I just had a dream? Tang Ping hesitated, but soon he realized that it was definitely not a dream, because in his mind, another person's memories had clearly emerged 18 complete years of memories. This could not be explained as a dream. With a look of astonishment on his face, Tang Ping recalled that the previous scene had been so real he could even vividly remember the excruciating hunger that made his stomach. Spasm, am I back to a century ago? Or is it another world? Tang Ping quickly got up and grabbed the phone charging by his bed. He wanted to see what the date was. To prove whether he was in the same world as that of a century later, all he needed to do was wait. January 1st, 2030. Tang Ping's breath quickened that if he was indeed in the world from a century ago, then tonight at 8 o'clock, the universal apocalypse game would arrive. Chapter 2. Preparations before the apocalypse game. With 8 hours left, whether it was real or not, he needed to prepare some supplies in advance. Tang Ping began to scour his memory for information about the early days of the global apocalypse game. First, the most memorable thing was that everyone would become players after choosing a shelter, obtaining a system panel, and awakening a talent. This was also what the future Tang Ping envied the most. Second, there was the shelter. A century later, the safe zones are established around the shelters of high-level players. The safe zone where they are located consists of a total of 9,981 zones, which can be said to expand outward in 4 layers centered around the high-level player's shelter. As for this shelter, it is not fixed and immovable, but can be carried around. Players need to find an item to use as a medium to establish their shelter. When they need to enter the shelter, they just have to toss the item to the ground, and the shelter will appear. When leaving the shelter, they can carry the item with them. Moreover, this item cannot be damaged or discarded. It can be said to be the fundamental route for the initial players to survive one disaster after another. The shelter is like a mobile fortress of safety. Additionally, depending on the type and function of the item, the shelter will gain various characteristics. Some have used an ancient sword as a shelter, gaining the shelter characteristic of Sword Immortal. When a shelter transforms into the form of the ancient sword, they can fly with the sword and strike enemies from 100 steps away. In later generations, they could even behead foes from 1,000 miles away. Some have used a golden Buddha as a shelter, gaining the shelter characteristic of Golden Lotus Barrier. The area where the shelter is located will be protected by the indestructible Golden Lotus Barrier. Some have used a white Jade Guanyin as a shelter, gaining the shelter characteristic of Jade Purification Bottle. The shelter can produce a divine water that not only heals wounds, but also promotes rapid plant growth. However, Tang Ping does not have the strength to obtain these items, but he has one item that possesses characteristics not inferior to those of these items. Tang Ping held his phone, feeling a bit excited. This item is the phone, but to compare it with those shelters, one condition must be met. The first person to use the phone as a shelter can obtain this SS-level characteristic. Minigame. Do not underestimate this characteristic in later generations. Tang Ping also went through 9 years of compulsory education, and all of this was learned in history, including a class specifically discussing the SSS characteristic, minigame. That high-level player initially obtained a minigame, a pixelated small farm. The pixelated small farm allows for entry in its true form, and it refreshes seeds every day. These magical seeds can only be planted in the pixelated small farm, but can be harvested in just a few days, some even in half a day. As for all subsequent shelter characteristic scrolls used, they will gain various mini-games, each with incredible abilities. Tang Ping tightly gripped his phone. If the global apocalypse game truly arrives, then this is his chance to change his fate. However, he still needs to prepare, because with the arrival of the game, various disasters will follow one after another. Tang Ping carefully recalled the information about the disasters from his memories. These disasters, known to later generations, had no warning when they first arrived. The first disaster after the global apocalypse game arrives is called corruption. All food will rot and become completely inedible within a month, and there's a risk of infection from consuming corrupted food. Only food stored inside the shelter within 30 minutes of selecting can be spared. The second disaster is referred to as pollution. The land, water sources, and air will be completely polluted within 3 months, and all plants and animals will start to mutate into terrifying pollution beasts. The third disaster is called Gray Sunday. Over the next 8 months, the sun will gradually be shrouded in gray mist, ultimately being completely obscured after 8 months. Thus, the blue star will completely enter an era referred to as the era of calamity by those a century later. Tang Ping recalled the broken world a century later in his memories, trembling all over. Was that really a world where humans could survive? No, regardless of whether it's true or not, I must prepare sufficient supplies to help myself survive the initial disaster, reducing the time consumed for resources to gain more. Opportunities for development. He made a decision in his heart, looking at the balance in his bank account. 27,800 yuan. As a university graduate for just a year, his salary is not high, and after being frugal, he has saved this much money. But it's enough. Tang Ping quickly took a taxi to a food wholesale market and purchased Wild Warrior's Ace compressed biscuits, a box costing 35 yuan, containing 40 packs, each weighing 100 grams. Convenient for carrying and ready to eat. He directly hoarded 200 boxes, spending 7,000 yuan, and because of the bulk purchase, each box was discounted by 5 yuan, costing him 6,000 yuan. Then he bought the same brand of luncheon meat cans, purchasing 2,000 cans. Due to the discount and being only half a year from expiration, each can was only 5 yuan, with each can weighing 200 grams, totaling 10,000 yuan. Although the quantity is large, the space it occupies is not big. The initial shelter is 3 meters wide, 4 meters long, and 3 meters high, which is enough to store these foods. As for water, he also bought 50 packs of mineral water, each pack containing 24 bottles. These supplies are almost sufficient. By the time he moved everything back to his rental apartment, it was already 6 p.m., and there were less than 2 hours left until 8 p.m. With the remaining more than 10,000 yuan, he didn't continue preparing supplies, but instead went to buy a beautifully designed gold ring. If he doesn't become the first player to use the phone as a shelter, he would choose to unbind and use the gold ring as a shelter. A shelter made of gold typically wouldn't be too bad. At the very least, it would have a clever characteristic, serving as a safety net. Gold is also a universally recognized item that guarantees shelter characteristics. Having spent all his savings, Tang Ping didn't continue preparing but quietly waited. As the time gradually approached, Tang Ping became increasingly anxious, his hands holding the phone and gold ring trembling slightly. Ding! The global apocalypse has arrived. Everyone on Blue Star will face an apocalyptic game. Please select any one item within 30 minutes. The apocalyptic game will use this item as a medium to generate a 343 cubic meter shelter for you. If you do not choose any item after 30 minutes, it will be considered a forfeiture. Note, the item selection box is a cube with a side length of 20 centimeters. Items exceeding this range cannot be selected as a shelter. I choose the phone.